Jean Humbrecht with Humbrecht Law here, criminal and traffic defense attorney in Manassas, Virginia. I'm very glad that you are joining my webinar today. It's actually, I think, going to be very informative for a lot of people. We are going to be talking about new expectations in real estate today. There have been a lot of changes that a lot of us do not know about. So we have two special guests that are very qualified to tell us a lot of information. Hopefully clear up some misinformation. And if you guys have any questions while we're going, feel free to write them in the comments and we will try to answer them. And if you're watching this video later, the replay, still feel free to type in a comment or a question and we can, one of the three of us can try to get back to you. So before I get to introducing my guests, if you guys can leave a little note in the comments about where you're signing in from, give us a like or a love or a wow if you hear something you like. But I'm going to get right into it now. So first we have Darren Marquardt, who is a real estate agent extraordinaire with Long & Foster. He is very experienced. He's going to be talking to us about what he is, basically his experience and what he's noticed in the past few months. And then we also have Trevor Whalen, who is going to be talking about the lending side of things, because purchasing the real estate and looking at real estate and the lending obviously go hand in hand. So Darren, if you want to go first, and then Trevor, you can tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Again, Darren Marquardt. I head up the Marquardt team at Long & Foster. I've been licensed for just under 20 years in Virginia. And in addition to being a retail sales agent for Long & Foster, I'm also their corporate trainer. So I actually train agents how to sell real estate. And I am the founding member of the Northern Virginia Roundtable, which is a business education organization. What else would you like to know off the top right there? Is that it? Is that good?
Anything that you want people to know about you, and do you mainly work with buyers or sellers? You know, things like that.
Sure. I work with a combination of buyers and sellers, and it's about, for me, roughly 60% buyers, 40% sellers. I'd like that to be the reverse, but sellers at a high demand right now. And yeah, looking forward to having a further discussion. Let me turn it over to Trevor and let him introduce himself.
Hi guys, Trevor Whalen. I'm a senior loan officer with Homeside Financial. I've been in the lending industry for about 6 years now. Prior to that, I've been in doing some kind of work with real estate since about 2012. Obviously I work with only buyers. I work with a combination of first-time home buyers, people moving up, people trying to downsize. So pretty much anyone that's looking to buy a home.
Trevor and I actually met quite a while ago. We've been collaborating for a long time because in addition to Trevor having an expertise in mortgages, he also has an expertise in insurance.
Oh.
I did insurance for a number of years prior to moving into the space.
Maybe we'll get to see Darren's dogs at some point. So I know there's really so much we can cover, but to try to be a little bit organized about it, I have never owned a home yet. So I come at this from a perspective of a first-time home buyer, obviously. So I think there are things that first-time home buyers will want to know, and then also people who have purchased homes before who are used to the process. Because first-time home buyers don't really know what's going on, or they think they know what's going on. And if you purchased a home before, I imagine things are very different than they've been before. So Darren, if you want to maybe kind of address both of those.
Yeah, sure. I tell all my clients, regardless of whether or not they're a first-time home buyer or having bought 4 or 5 homes, that every time you buy a home is a new experience. And we're certainly seeing that now because we've had a lot of changes that have taken place just in the last 2 months. But the process of buying a home is fairly simple and easy. You always want to have somebody working with you like a real estate professional. because I can only speak about Virginia real estate because that's where I'm licensed. In Virginia, it's considered a buyer beware state, and a very low or almost no disclosure state, meaning that the sellers in Virginia don't have to disclose anything really much about the property. They almost have to tell you nothing, and real estate agents only have to disclose what's called adverse material fact, things that we know. Are about the property, the factual information about the property. When you're buying a home, you always want to start with some sort of consultation, and that part of the process is designed to find out a little bit about it, share what you're looking for and where you want it, and then for me to also give you an idea of what the basic process is. And the very first step after identifying what you want to do, which is to buy a home, is to get qualified for a mortgage, which is why I immediately then refer a client over to a great mortgage lender. In this case, I regularly refer to Trevor Whalen with Homeside because of the great skills that he brings to the table. There's a lot of programs that are out there that are designed for first-time home buyers, just so you know, Gene. Some have income requirements, some have other requirements, but so I go over that whole process with all my buyer clients. Really, it's what the key thing is. What I tell all my clients when I'm working with a buyer, especially, is that I'm not here in the role of a salesperson. I'm here in the role of a consultant. You decided to buy a home. Selling part is done. I don't have to sell you anything. Now my job is to help you identify the right property with the right price and negotiate the right terms that's best for you, and we move forward with that that way. And so, Trevor, talk a little bit about getting the pre-qual started, because that's really the next step.
Yeah. So after meeting with Darren and kind of getting an idea of a little bit around kind of homes that you're looking for, the next step is to talk to me, and we can start looking at actual finances. One thing that people don't realize is you can get qualified for a lot more home than you probably want a lot of the time. So the first step is always to set a budget. Find out what you're paying now, what you're comfortable paying in the future, because the last thing you want to do is buy an amazing house and then not have the money to put any furniture or appliances or anything into it. So we usually try and set a budget, set an area that someone's looking in, try and decide, are you looking at a condo, a townhome, a single family home? Because those can all have differences on what your total overall payment is going to end up being. And after that, we really have to start digging into the finances. We have to find out how long you've been employed somewhere, how much money you're making, what especially now with everything going on with COVID, what the chances of that income continuing in the future are. And we can talk about that a little bit later, but that's a big piece of it now, is making sure that income is going to continue, and you're going to, we know that the loan is going to be paid back.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I don't know the best way you guys want to talk about the changes over the past few months, but a lot of people have been out of work or still out of work, or maybe they were out of work for a short amount of time. Maybe they were furloughed. Maybe they just made less money. So I think a lot of people watching this, are going to have all those questions. So I guess whatever way you guys want to, address that, if you want to talk about that now, or just start talking about the changes in real estate. You guys are the experts here, so you tell me, like what have you noticed that has changed that people need to know about?
So one big thing, especially in the Northern Virginia, DC area, is self-employment. Yeah. Self-employed borrowers. I mean, around here, there are a ton of people that own their own business. Gene, you yourself do. Yeah. In the past, we used to just be able to take the last 2 years' tax returns, average those together, and that's how much money you make. We can assume that that's how much money you're going to continue making. Now, with everything going on, actually just this morning, Fannie Mae released, not only do we have to look at the last 2 years, but now we actually need an audited P&L to make sure that the income is still remaining.
What's a P&L?
So that's gonna profit and loss statement. So that's to make sure that there hasn't been a substantial decline in income. Now, obviously, this is on a case-by-case basis. So if you work in an industry like, myself and Darren work in real estate, when the summer is really the time that things get busy and we make most of our money. So things like that, we can look at seasonality and look at last year and make sure that everything is still lining up. But the real goal here is to make sure that as a self-employed person, you're not suddenly seeing a huge decrease, and the money you made last year isn't going to be the money you make this year, because we want to make sure we qualify you for something that you can afford, and we'll get paid back. So that's probably the biggest change is we used to never have to get an audited profit and loss statement. And now that's as of this morning, that is now a requirement for any kind of conventional loan.
So for people who don't really understand, and maybe me, because I want to ask the question, like say you've got your 2019 as somebody who owns their own business, you have a 2019 tax return, you've got your 2018 tax return, that's already done. We're halfway through 2020. So I would have to do a profit and loss statement like up through now into 2020.
Correct.
Now, if somebody has had less business because of COVID and all the shutdowns, regardless of whatever industry they're in, are the lenders taking that into account at all? Does it depend on the industry and the job specifically?
So it is on an underwriting discretion.
Okay.
So it's not a hard and fast rule that's been released by Fannie stating how we have to calculate.
Okay.
But we do, so we can take into account how, if business is picking up as things are starting to reopen, as far as using the last 2 years as the overall income. But if there has been a substantial decline and we don't see that picking back up, then most likely we're going to have to take this year's income and use it in calculating what your overall income is going to be. So a lot of people may see that their qualifying income is a lot less than what they expected, simply because of everything going on. They're seeing a decline in their real income this year.
Mm-hmm. And Dean, I might add, similarly, from my perspective, and what I noticed as a significant change, especially after the shutdown, that sellers were making greater demands on prospective buyers, meaning that in the past, if you wanted to see a house, you just make an appointment generally and you go and see the house. But with the shutdown and with the fear of the coronavirus spreading, sellers started to making strong demands that only pre-qualified buyers actually enter the house. And in fact, not only that, but some sellers have even made the demands that only the prospective buyers whose names will be on the contract are allowed in the house. So it's a very similar thing. And I also noticed in the having working with a lot of landlords and tenants, as a application process, we're asking similar questions to what the mortgage companies are asking, which is what kind of industry are you in, and what's the likelihood that you're going to be working throughout the entire time period of the lease. I just had a landlord that I was working with turn down an application because for fear that the applicant who worked in the restaurant business may not have the income to support the entire year.
And I'm seeing that a lot as well. When people put in offers, we generally do a courtesy call to the listing agent to make them feel comfortable and know that we've reviewed finances. And the first question almost always that I'm asked now is, what industry do they work in? Have they been seeing a decline because of COVID? Because they don't want to. Now we actually have to do a 2-day verification of employment 2 days prior to close. So these sellers want to make sure that, yeah, they look good now, but can you assure me with confidence if we move forward with your client and your contract that they're going to look good in 25, 30 days when we're going to close? It's the last thing anyone wants is to have a deal fall apart 2 days before the actual close.
And in fact, agents in my office, I work out of the Fairfax office, Fairfax County office. It's called Fairfax Center. It's right near Chantilly, near the Greenbrier Shopping Center. But we handle all of Northern Virginia, but I had reports of several real estate agents whose clients were declined a mortgage just a few days before their closing because of their industry that they were in, and the appearance that their industry was not going to be able to support the income.
Huh. Even though they had qualified and proved everything that they needed to.
Right, because they did exactly what Trevor was just talking about. They did a recertification or reevaluation of the employment, and it was some of them were furloughed, some of them were laid off, and several. I heard of several whose jobs were actually made obsolete, or they were fired. Not fired. It's not really fired. It's laid off.
Right.
Dissolved, no longer qualifying, and they discovered that just a day or two before the closing.
Now, if something like that were to happen, what would happen to who's at fault? Who is legally at fault? Who breached the contract? Does the buyer lose their earnest money deposit? What happens?
So that's a good question, and it usually, oftentimes, involves an attorney. I'm not an attorney, so I don't practice law. However, the answer in a nutshell is it depends, because the way the Northern Virginia regional sales contract is, we have things like financial contingencies, which allow the buyer to back out of a sales contract or void a contract because of finances falling through. That being said, there are two. It depends if the contingency was removed or not. So when I work with a buyer, I do my best to make sure that the financial contingency remains intact until after the closing. I don't want the financial contingency to be removed. However, sellers, because it's in their benefit to have the financial contingencies removed. So therefore, it depends on whether or not financial contingency was in place. In my career in general, that usually when there's a dispute, usually parties are able to come to some sort of agreement. Although there are disputes frequently, and those generally money gets held up in escrow, and then both sides end up fighting it out in court. Mm-hmm. But I think that in general, especially during the COVID, there was a lot of flexibility. And in fact, the association, I'm a member of the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors, which of course is a chapter of the Virginia Association of Realtors, which is of course a chapter of the National Association of Realtors. They came out with a special addendum specifically related to COVID. I can pull that up if you're interested. It basically spells out all the different sort of possibilities that might come about as a result of COVID-19, which includes delayed settlements and or the settlement not taking place.
That's really interesting. I'm glad that you said that, because COVID obviously, didn't exist in the past, and there's no way it could be written into any real estate contract. And by the way, we're talking about contracts and starting to get into the legal discussion. So I must say that this webinar is for informational purposes only, and this is not establishing an attorney-client relationship. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I do not handle real estate law at all. Anybody that's watching who does real estate law, you can put your information in there so people can contact you. But the purpose of this is to let people know just changes that are going on right now. And, laws change all the time. And actually, this is a good segue into my last question, or my next question. So, what we're talking about today, which is June 5th, things could be different, in a week. However, it's just important to know about these overall big changes that Darren and Trevor are going to be talking to us about, because the big changes are probably going to continue to be in place for a while and apply. So actually I have two questions. I wanted to talk about just contracts in general and what people are up in. When you said these addendums and contingencies, I have a general idea what you're talking about. If you could just tell everybody a little bit about like how contracts were in the past, and if contracts for real estate have changed due to COVID, if they have changed yet.
So as you probably can appreciate, Gene, changing legal wording is not something that's done really quickly. And in real estate, it's done by a panel essentially of real estate professional attorneys, real estate attorneys that specialize in real estate. Those they go through long processes of paneling. So the actual regional sales contract hasn't had any significant changes. That being said, I was very impressed and very pleased that the association and my own company, Long & Foster, both came out with COVID-related addendums right away. Not everybody is using them, but they are available if necessary. Let me just real quickly share with you what that looks like, if I can.
Okay.
Yeah, I got it right here, COVID. All right, let me see if I can get it. I thought I had it up. COVID addendum. There we go. Open. You see that?
I cannot see anything yet.
Okay. Let's see here. Try this one more time.
I'm just going to put my headphones in while you're bringing up.
For some reason it's not pulling up. If I can figure out a way to get this to show up, I will. But essentially, the addendum states that that everybody, that both the buyer and seller acknowledge that there's a pandemic and that there are unforeseeable and indefinite impacts on real estate transaction. And so the addendum is designed to protect both parties from default in the event that they're unable to perform the circumstances. It describes what an unforeseeable event might be, which includes the epidemic, quarantines, government declarations, emergencies, delays, closings, and things like that. It does have a no default section, which allows buyer and seller shall not be in default or incur any liability to other parties for any losses or damages as a failure of their performance under the contract as a result of this. Then there's two options. One is deadline and settlement date and deadline extensions and specific extensions, and it spells out who would be responsible for covering the costs if those are. It can be the buyer, it can be the seller, or it can be divided between both parties. And depending on how all parties agree to how those things will be done is how it's said. Sorry, I can't pull it up. I thought I could, but I can't.
Oh, no, that's okay. We can always put a link to something later in the comment section.
Yeah, sure. Or anybody can always reach out to me, and I'm happy to share any information regarding that on an individual consultation basis.
Okay. Now, so we talked a lot about finances and contracts. In terms of actually looking at the property, have there been any changes that buyers or sellers need to be aware of?
Let's ask that again. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I thought my audio was better with the mic. But we talked a lot about contracts and the actual approval for the property. But in terms of actually going to physically look at a property, are there any changes that either a seller or buyer needs to be aware of? Because I would imagine that not a lot of, I would think that not a lot of people would be comfortable going in to look at houses like they were before, or that not a lot of sellers would want people coming through their house constantly.
Yeah. Yes, there are some changes. One of the other things I want to say just about the contract that it's, I wouldn't say a new practice, but it's certainly an important practice, especially during this. It's that the buyer's lender really important to communicate with when writing a contract, because the lender's going to provide the information about whether or not things need to be delayed, or how much time I'm going to need for my buyers to settle. In a normal circumstance, a home sale could easily be settled in 20 to 40 days, 30 days being sort of the average. At the beginning of the shutdown and the COVID thing, when I was talking to some of the lenders, including Trevor, several of them asked for slightly longer closing periods just because we didn't know how long it was going to take. Now, Trevor, I think we're now back to a more normal 30-day process. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, so we're it didn't seem like it really varied at all. We had a short period of time that we were definitely a little worried about what was going to go on with appraisals, because that's another just third party that's entering a home. But we've gotten back to the standard timeline. So thankfully, we haven't seen any kind of issues with getting closings on time due to COVID.
And I found that to be true too. And the appraisal was one of the concerns. Normally, the appraisal process is around safely. We put in at least give the lender 21 days to have that handled. Usually takes about 2 weeks total, but because of some issues of accessing properties. Now that leads us to how can you see a house? These partial and complete shutdowns, and fortunately, real estate was deemed essential.
Mm-hmm.
So that did give buyers and sellers the ability to maintain, to continue to finish transactions, and buyers and tenants did go out and actually physically see properties. But we had to use a lot. We had to use a lot of precautions, and those precautions are still in place. When I meet a customer or a client to show a property, obviously I maintain social distancing, wear masks, and for me, I usually bring gloves, I bring disinfectant and paper towels. I ask the prospective buyer not to touch any surfaces, so I actually take on the risk because, and I go in and I spray everything. And it's easy to get into a house that's vacant because you're not putting the seller at risk.
Mm-hmm.
Homes that are not vacant are still being seen in person on occasion, but a lot of times sellers are asking for some guarantees and tips, some precautions to be made. I have seen, especially early on in the shutdown, actual disclosures and forms that were being asked to be signed by the buyer's agent and the buyers prior to previewing the property in person that discloses or basically is a signed acknowledgement that you don't have a temperature, that you don't have any symptoms related to or similar to the coronavirus, and that you take full responsibility. And then, that you are pre-qualified to purchase the home, that you're in an industry where you don't foresee being laid off, et cetera, et cetera. There were actual forms that some sellers sent out.
Okay.
So as a result, early in the shutdown, a lot of buyers were buying houses, and they still are actually, by previewing properties only virtually. There are some very sophisticated showing programs out there and photographic processes where you can actually preview a home as if you're walking right through it and you're in there in person, the virtual 3D tours. And open houses, which are a very popular way to get a house sold and to market a property. During the shutdown, I don't think I heard anyone doing a public open house. However, in the past week or so, I have started seeing on some of the real estate boards that communication boards that I participate in that agents are starting to do open houses to the public. In the past, before the pandemic, an open house, in fact, I did an open house in early February. I had 60 plus people come through the house. It wasn't uncommon to have 10 to 20 people in the house at the same time. But that is not the case now. Most real estate agents are doing similar things to say what you do when you go to a shopping, when you go shopping, grocery shopping. They tape off things and say, please wait in line, and they maintain social distancing and allow one party in at a time into the house and try to disinfect the house after every showing. So that means that the open houses are a little cumbersome in public.
Now, have you noticed that there are maybe fewer homes on the market or fewer buyers? Are people more hesitant to be looking at homes now or selling homes?
So to be honest with you, I have been surprised, and Trevor, you might share this. The first 2 or 3 weeks, I noticed like almost a complete halt.
Mhm.
But about 3 weeks in, I noticed, wow, people are really out there, out and about, and there's always some folks that were just not that denied that the virus was an issue at all. So I had a house go on the market at the beginning of this last month. It went under contract in 8 days. I had over 10 showings in less than 3 days. So the buyer demand is really high. I think stems from the fact that interest rates are so low. What do you think, Trevor?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of different things. Obviously, when everything started happening with the shutdowns, people were a little worried. Everyone wanted to make sure that they stayed indoors. But after the initial shock wore off, I feel like people, if they wanted to buy a house and move, they still had that desire. And because, especially the precautions that realtors like Darren are taking, they can still view houses safely.
Yeah.
So the demand still seems to be there, and right now we are in a market where interest rates are at historic lows. So that's helping drive demand of people wanting to go out and see properties and make that purchase now, because they know that right now is going to be the same house, even for the same price, is going to cost more next year versus what it does right now. Additionally, we are very fortunate for the area that we live in, where we have a lot of people that are essential, that are unable to, that either are able to work from home. That, oh, it looks like we lost Darren there for a second.
Oh, Darren can join us again. I can let him back in, but
Sure. But, the area we live in, a lot of people are able to still continue working full time from home.
mhm,
We have a lot of essential employees. We have so many government employees
mhm.
that are in this area, government contractors that are necessary, that we really haven't seen. While we're definitely seeing an impact of unemployment and underemployment in this area, it's so much less than most of the other areas of the country, that most people still have the financial means to go out and purchase a property. And the one of the big drivers of the spring and summer market is the fact that people want to move prior to getting kids into school. That
Yeah.
still remains a driver. People that want to move to a better school system, even with the shutdown and everything going on, they still want to make sure that come the fall, their kids are in the school system they want them to be in. So we're really not seeing, besides that very short window of time when things really started, we really haven't seen that much of a slowdown in the markets.
Okay. And so, as I said earlier, I'm in Manassas. Trevor, you're in Fairfax County, right? You work in Fairfax
Correct.
County. And then Darren works in Fairfax. So all of us are in Northern Virginia. But not everybody watching this might be in Northern Virginia. So is that just a Nova thing? Is that a Virginia thing? Or are those trends that you're seeing throughout the country?
So I'm only licensed in Virginia, Maryland, and DC. So, and most of the business I do is in Northern Virginia, DC, and Southern Maryland.
Okay.
And at least in these sections, it seems to be pretty pervasive throughout all three. I'm not really seeing a slowdown of any difference in Southern Maryland versus Northern Virginia. It seems to be the norm, that people are still going out. They still want to buy houses. They still want to get their family moved.
Yeah, sorry about that. I got bumped out. I think I had a glitch in my internet. I'm seeing the same thing. To be honest with you, I just did a run for a client the other day, because I was looking in Southern Virginia. It's not an area specialty, but she said, "Oh, I suspect that property that it's more of a buyer's market in the southern part of the state, and it is not. It's a seller's market everywhere, and buyer demand is at an extreme high, and still now." And she had written an offer on a HUD home, which is a foreclosed home, in the southern part of the state, and there were multiple offers, and she didn't get her offer selected. It just wasn't strong enough.
So yeah,
Yeah,
that,
I had.
oh, sorry, Trevor, go on.
Oh, I just wanted to speak to that. You know, in the few when all of this started, we saw a bit of a, you know, as Darren and myself were saying, we saw a bit of a slowdown. But at this point, we're still seeing most homes. We're still seeing multiple offers on them if they're priced right. We, as Darren was saying, he had a client just miss out on one. I had a client miss out on one that went $15,000 over the asking price and waived all of the contingencies.
Wow.
But there were 10 other offers on this same property because, you know, in this area, just with how expensive real estate is, and sadly, a $400,000 home is an inexpensive home in this area. It was a $400,000 townhome, and just that's the affordable price point in this area. So there were enough people offering on that home that even $15,000 over and no contingencies, there was a better offer than that.
Wow.
The market for buyers shifted for about 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks. I actually put a call out to a number of my buyers saying, now's the time, make the move.
Yeah.
And many of them, just out of fear, said, well, we want to wait.
Yeah.
And some of them are back in the market, and it's like, oh, boy, it didn't change much at all, did it? That's a good sign, though, Gene, for us, because if we had gone to a extreme buyer's market as a result of the shutdowns, that could, I think, would have been a disastrous sign for us economically. But because the real estate buyer demand remained high, I think that's a good sign for our recovery.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. And I actually bring an interesting perspective to this, and I think a lot of people that are in a similar situation would have the same question. So I'm self-employed. I know generally the requirements. You know, I've been working over the past few years to try to get everything in a row to purchase the property that I would want to live in. And I was looking shortly before the shutdown hit. And even at that point, I heard that it was a seller's market, and you know, there's certain things I need to jump through. You know, being just being self-employed, it's just, you know, I don't. The things are just different. Are things even harder for buyers now, or would you say they're the same as they were, you know, pre-COVID?
As far as qualification goes?
Well, yeah, in terms of qualifications, or else, you know, putting in an offer on a house, like from your perspective, Darren, like, are things harder?
From my perspective, it makes zero difference.
Okay.
And part of that is because of the type of way that real estate is handled in Virginia. Each party doesn't disclose things like that to one another, and so the seller would never know that you were self-employed. Because the only thing we provide to the seller besides your offer is verification that you have the earnest money deposit to and your letter of pre-qualification from your lender. Your lender is the one who those issues come up for the most. And then when we get a chance, we'll go back to talking about multiple offers, because I got my opinions on how to make those better.
Oh yeah, I do want to talk about that. But Trevor, have you noticed, is it more of a seller's market, or is it about the same?
It seems like it's remained the same, but it's pretty much always a seller's market in this area. This is where jobs are created.
Yeah.
This is where people are moving to. This is the demand is just there. Again, one of the reasons why we're not seeing a slowdown is because we're in this this kind of bubble that's very different from the rest of the country, where the jobs are remaining. We're still growing. I mean, Microsoft is just signed a contract here in Reston that they're going to bring 1,500 new jobs here, and they did that during this shutdown.
Yeah.
So we're just with the amount of people that want to be here, and the fact that the jobs are here, it's almost always a seller's market in this area, which, while disappointing when you're a buyer, when you actually get that house, that's a good thing, because that means that, you know, your property values, while of course we can never predict the future, we never know exactly what's going to happen, but most likely that's what makes real estate investment in this area and buying your own home such a good idea, is that it pretty much is guaranteed to continue appreciating. It's once you actually get into that home, it may have been hard. You may have had to go up against multiple people. It may have been the third house you offered on. I mean, I'm in the industry, and this house that I'm sitting in right now, this was the third house that I offered on. It took me that much to get accepted. But that just means that in 5-10 years down the road, when you want to move up, most likely you will have not only paid off a good portion of your principal from just your regular mortgage payments, but you're going to have a sizable chunk of change from selling that property just based on appreciation. So it's it's kind of a double-edged sword for buyers. It's hard to get in. It takes a lot of work to get an offer accepted, but once you do, you're in a really good place that you're not seeing in a lot of other parts of this country.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Trevor, for talking about that.
The regulation, the challenges for self-employed people getting qualified for mortgages actually were those biggest changes took place after the market crash in 2008, 2009, when new regulations came down, because prior to that, we could do things like stated income loans and document loans, and none of that exists anymore. Very little of it exists anymore. And that's one of the reasons why I was saying that, because buyer demand is good, it's good for our economy, because it was when we had those market crashes when all the changes came into play as to how people can qualify for. And as long as our economy is strong, we'll start to see those kind of regulations loosen up. We're probably not going to see them this year, but because it's unpredictable. But self-employed people get mortgages all the time.
Yeah.
It's just you have to do things like profit loss statements and things like that, and there's a lot more documentation needed than, say, the traditional W-2 job.
Okay.
But that's the thing about it. It's for qualifying as a self-employed borrower, it's really not that different from the regulations from the new standards that we have to do during COVID for a W-2 employee. Because yes, we didn't used to need a profit and loss statement, but at the same time, we also used to not have to do a 2-day verification of employment for someone. So it's the same thing. We're still just making sure that you are still making the money that you say that you're making and can show it. So yes, it is an extra step, and obviously it's a little bit more difficult to get an audited profit and loss statement versus just having your employer say yes, they still work here for the same number of hours. It's kind of the same, at the end of the day, it's kind of the same regulations as what a traditionally employed borrower has to go through. Just, are you still working? Are you still making the same amount of money? Okay. Are you going to be able to pay this loan back?
And in regards to any mortgage that you apply for, Gene, whether it's you as a self-employed person or anyone, this is the importance of a person like Trevor being on your team, as opposed to what we so frequently are marketed towards on television and media, where things like these online banking processes and where you don't actually communicate with an individual, and there are plenty of them. I won't necessarily name companies that I don't like to work with, but you can probably guess what they are quick. And but that's because when you apply for a loan online and there's no person connected to it like a Trevor, or any number of people that you might encounter who are actual real life people who are what I call mortgage consultants. Job is that's all their job is. Even when you just go to your bank, and nothing against anybody's bank, but when you talk to the banker that's sitting at the bank, that banker specialty or her specialty, they're general bankers. But when you're working with someone who, like Trevor, is a mortgage consultant, that's Trevor's niche. So for my clients, I always recommend someone like Trevor, and I want them to get to know who they're talking to and know that they can get advice from someone who this is all he does. 40 plus hours a week. And trust me, most mortgage lenders that I know, like Trevor, way more than 40 hours because they're answering calls at 10 at night on Sunday night because they have a realtor on the line going, I need a lender letter right now because we're submitting an offer, multiple offers, and we need to get it.
My wife loves it.
Which, talking about multiple offers, the reason why you want a high qualified, locally based lender for wherever you're working. So Trevor's based here in the DC market. So when a seller sees a lender letter from a company like Homeside, any number of companies that are based here, they're more likely going to say yes to that kind of a lender letter than if it comes from some online company that's based in California or Texas, which many of them are. And part of that is because Trevor's going to be working in Eastern Standard Time and California lender is working on West Coast time. And there's at least 3 or 4 hour difference sometimes. And those differences in time can make it impossible to communicate when you need to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So since we were kind of on the subject of multiple offers, as I'm a corporate trainer for Long & Foster, so I teach real estate agents how to sell real estate. And one of the topics I discuss with them is how to write a winning offer. And part of it is use a great lender that's locally based and have a high quality lender letter to go along with it. Lender letters come in a variety of forms, and some of them are just a lender up on the phone and say, I make this much money and I think my credit score is 750. Do I qualify for a loan? The lender will say, yes. Can you send me a letter that says that I qualify? And they will. It means zero. With the companies that I work with, and Trevor is one of them, I usually ask the lender to do a full qualification, verify income, verify credit, and make sure that my buyer actually can buy a home. So that when a lender, when a seller that's got multiple offers lines all the offers and they line up all the pre-qualification letters, they can go, this pre-qualification letter states that the person has already gone through a process of underwriting. This is a stronger offer than this other offer. Price is is only one tiny portion of winning a multiple offer situation. And in fact, I've won a number of bids with clients and we weren't the highest price, but we had good terms and we had a well-written contract.
Yeah, just to speak to Darren's point, the biggest fear that a seller has is they've taken a house off the market, they've spent 3-4 weeks waiting on something to get done, and then there at the end they find out this isn't closing, and now they have to put the property back on the market. Now it's going to show that it's been on the market for an extended period of time, which is going to make a lot of people think they can offer less on that, and it's going to just cost them more money. They've got to make additional mortgage payments. They've been carrying that home for longer. They've got all of the other costs that are involved with owning a home. So their ultimate goal is this going to close? And are we going to get paid on time and get rid of this house?
Yep.
And one of you mentioned earlier that there was an offer that was over $15,000 over the asking price, and that person still didn't get it. And you said it's a seller's market. You also mentioned that people are doing virtual tours, and people, I think I brought this up, people would be hesitant to go see a property. Is the fact that some people might not want to go to a property, is that going to affect them, or are people making offers without seeing a house?
The answer is yes, and they probably are going to continue to buy houses without seeing them initially, probably at least until next spring.
Wow.
Especially if we see in the fall the coronavirus kind of start to increase again. I've heard a number of people, I haven't had it myself, but I have had a number of agents in my office. I talk to the agents in my office on a regular basis, and every Tuesday we have a sales meeting. So always communicating with them. People many buyers are seeing the houses on a virtual tour. finding out that they need to submit offers right away. They submit their offer, and if they get the winning offer, when they actually physically get to see the property is at home inspection. Fortunately, and again, a great real estate agent like myself, someone who really understands all the ins and outs of the sales contract and knows how to protect buyer clients, and I really know how to do that. That's an okay place to be, Gene. So, because if you're not seeing the house until your home inspection, and you get to the house and you realize, oh, this is just terrible, there are ways to back out of that contract legally and with using your earnest money deposit. In Virginia, for those of you who are not from Virginia, we use some states have called escrows. We don't have that kind of real estate, but we do use something called an earnest money deposit, where you put a deposit up front. Mm-hmm. That's what the money that a buyer puts at risk. And that's what I, as a buyer's agent, am trying to protect. So even if you see the house in person initially and you actually end up getting the house, there are plenty of ways, especially in the first 2 weeks of a sales contract, to legally back out and not lose your deposit. And I know for one, am pretty good at that.
Have you noticed a lot of people doing that, or is it kind of too soon to tell because the whole process takes on average 30 days?
It's happening.
I've had two clients. And while obviously I can't speak to their total reasoning, but home inspections that have very, very minor things. But that was the first time they saw the house. They suddenly decided that these small items are just too much to replacing that light switch is just too much work. They need to find a different home. So we're definitely seeing it.
And Gene, just so you know, and this is, I think, unique to the DC market. I think it would probably also be true of markets like in New York and LA and some parts of Florida. We are an international market. Mm-hmm. And many of our buyers and sellers are from other places outside of the region. And so I actually, for my entire career, have had clients who have never seen the house physically until the day they moved in.
Oh, okay.
Actually, part of the reason why I think, especially agents in the Northern Virginia region, and I can certainly say that Long & Foster has always been at the forefront of this because we have an international relocation company. We were prepared to do things like high quality virtual showings. And because I last year I sold a house to a woman who lived in Dubai, who never saw the house until she moved into it. And so it's not an unusual practice. And I think it's going to become more commonplace, especially we have been seeing. It's not uncommon. Now, you might not like that. That's not your personality type, and I totally get that. And the great thing is that there are ways still to physically see properties. And like I said, even in the first month of the shutdown, I still did meet with on a few occasions to show properties in person. So, excuse me. So there's still ways to do it. We just do it with safe practices. But yeah, I think this is going to be actually the way real estate moves forward.
So in the past, I could just go to a realtor and say, I want to go look at this property, that property. They'd be like, okay, we'd look at it. That's going to change, right? I mean, you might have to make appointments. You know, I'm required to wear a mask, or I could be required to wear a mask. So it's what you're saying is it's still possible, but it's just not going to be business as usual, or business as
definitely not. It's tightened up, unlike in a way that I had not anticipated. That because like in January, if you had called me up, Gene, and said I'd like to see a property, I personally would have required you to have a lender letter because I only work with qualified buyers, but I wouldn't necessarily go to all the precautions that I go to now. Mm-hmm. Yes, it would have been in January, December, even last spring, very easy to go see a house, whether or not you were really interested in it or not,
Mhm.
and access it. But that's just not likely to be come back anytime soon. I think
Mhm.
sellers have gotten wise to that, and nobody wants to have their house put at risk.
Mhm.
The risk of infection being spread because someone has seen the property that really wasn't even qualified to buy it.
Mhm.
So as I mentioned earlier, sellers in some instances are asking for a disclosure to be signed prior to seeing the property, which includes things like descriptions of your current health status, and whether or not you actually are qualified to buy the house, and whether or not you're in an industry in which your job you have job security.
Mhm.
My last buyer client that settled um, worked for the FBI, and so we were in a situation where that wasn't a concern.
Mhm.
But I have had a couple of people who have come to me from the restaurant industry, and we've been having some issues getting a solid commitment from the lender.
Mhm.
Not
Yeah.
Trevor, but
Well, I mean that it makes sense. It makes sense, but I think it's very important for people to know all these things. And I mean, people you can assume that. I mean, it makes sense, but just to know that what you said, Trevor, earlier, it's not impossible. It's just that the things that you might have to prove or just kind of change a little bit. You still have to prove that you're working and that your income is what you said it was. But yeah, so it makes sense. But Trevor, I actually wanted to ask you a question because Coach Powell wanted to know if this was a good time to refinance, and when people should really consider that. Now, we have not talked about refinancing at all, but I just wanted to throw that in there because we had the question.
Yeah. So right now, rates are at historic lows. So it's always if you're seeing that your rate seems like it's higher than what you're seeing from the people you know, that's always a good time to take a look. Refinancing is a much easier process than purchasing a home. It requires a little bit less paperwork. At the same time, it's a little less expensive, and the one biggest part is you're not under a timeline that you're going to lose a house if you don't do this. So it's a lot less stressful. But the best thing to do whenever you're looking at something with refinancing is to look at what your overall goals for that property are. How long do you plan to stay there? Because refinancing, it still involves, there are still closing costs. There's still things that the title company is going to charge. There's still, much less. There's still taxes that are involved. So the last thing you want to do is say, I'm going to refinance right now and save $150 a month, and it's going to cost me $4,000, and then I'm going to sell this next year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great that you saved $150 a month this year, but when you go to sell it in a year, you actually spent $1,500 out of pocket that you're not going to get back. So it's always good to look at what the actual goals are. Saving money is always a great thing, but you want to make sure that it's not just saving money in the short term. You want to make sure that it makes sense for your long-term financial goals. So, it's always a good idea to look at. It's very easy to do that calculation and just see if it's going to make sense and see how long it's going to take you to recoup the cost. That's always my recommendation. With interest rates being where they are, it's a good time to explore the option. That doesn't mean that for every single person, it's the right thing to do at this current time.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for Trevor.
Yeah.
During the shutdown, banks were loosening up their they were allowing, some banks, I think, some mortgage companies were allowing homeowners to take a forbearance, short-term or longer term. How is that affecting repurchasing and or refinancing?
So thankfully, about a week and a half ago, we finally got new guidelines on this. So previously, we were all under the impression that it would be a 2-year wait period after coming out of forbearance before you'd be able to purchase another home or refinance.
So hang on to that just 1 second, Trevor. So can you imagine, Gene, if you took a forbearance that was allowed to you because of the COVID? What Trevor was just saying is that about 2 weeks ago, it would have meant that banks were probably going to make you wait for 2 years before you could repurchase or refinance.
Yeah, I heard that. That's
But now what, Trevor?
So now, now it's just you have to have made 3 timely payments. So you have to have a plan formalized, signed, and worked out with your lender as far as how the money is going to be paid back. And after that, you have to be back on track and have to make 3 payments on time. So now we're just looking at a 3-month wait period instead of a 2-year. But it's very similar to the way it used to be for foreclosures and bankruptcies.
Oh, okay.
I used to have to wait years, and then 2008 happened, and everyone had a foreclosure or a bankruptcy. So now you can get, I mean, you can go to some crazy lengths and pay an astronomical interest rates and get a new loan a day after bankruptcy. But a standard loan you can get after 2 years instead of having to wait. Previously, I believe it was 4 years. So it's kind of the same thing. Most of the standards are kind of tailored to what's going on. Now, sometimes it takes a while. You know, it took a few months for this to come out. But overall, the ultimate goal is, if this is something that's affecting a huge portion of the population, then it would be insane for us to be basing it on standards that were from years ago when this wasn't happening, when it was only a very small select few going into forbearance. But when it becomes an almost norm, then forcing the entire country to wait 2 years to buy a house would be detrimental. So
would be disastrous, which
it
is
would.
Right.
I was really grateful when I heard this news as well. I also heard that to refinance, if you had a forbearance, you have to have paid off the past due amount, the portion that you hadn't paid in full. Is that true, Trevor?
So the way I've been reading the guidelines, it looks like as long as you have a plan set in place, then you should be able to move forward as long as you've made those 3 timely payments. Now, unfortunately, sometimes that's the way that Fannie guidelines are written. Same with when we were talking about looking at the income. Sometimes they say this is a requirement, but also it's up to you. So
maybe some room for interpretation from lender to lender. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and it's the same. It's the same with the income piece of, you have to analyze this year's income. You have to get this exact piece of paper, but also use your due diligence and use your best judgment. So it's most likely you should be able to do anything with that 3-month timely payment, but there's still going to be some variance and some analysis.
But just word to the wise for those homeowners that if you have opted, and people opted it because it was available, not necessarily because they needed it, that it, you've taken the forbearance, and so that, and mortgage companies are looking at, can you repay that, or will you pay it, or does this person demonstrate that they want to repay it as a part of their mortgage approval process? So if you got a forbearance during the COVID shutdowns, that didn't go away. You still owe that money, and you really want to make arrangements to have that paid right away, or make arrangements with your bank to roll it in however they want to, so that you don't find yourself in a situation in 6 months trying to apply for a mortgage or a refinance, and the mortgage lender go, paid this debt.
So that's the thing. Any kind of major financial issue like a forbearance, we have to get an explanation for. And so that's a big part of it. When I talk about underwriter discretion, is we're going to ask reasons for things. We're going to try and see why this happened. And obviously it's all going to vary, and and I can't say with 100% certainty, but I can estimate that if you say that, I was fine, but I didn't feel like paying this, and that it was offered, that's not going to be looked on very favorably by a lender that, well, you completely had the means, you didn't lose your job, you had no actual reason to stop paying it, because a lender is going to look at that as, well, what's going to stop you from immediately, when you have any kind of possibility of not paying us. So
Right.
my recommendation is, if you can make your mortgage payment, make your mortgage payment.
I would agree with that.
Nothing positive is going to come. It's not free money. That money has to be paid back. There's an interest rate on this. No matter how you get it set up to be paid back, the best case scenario is you're going to still end up paying the exact same amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
The worst case scenario is that's going to get added to your loan payments. So you're going to be paying more on a month-to-month basis, or you're going to, if it's added to just the entirety of the loan itself, now you're paying interest on a larger loan amount over a longer period of time, which is going to cost you more money in the long run. So if you can pay it, pay your mortgage. There's no reason not to. I can't stress that enough. This is not free money.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the same vein, tenants have been given a bit of a respite during the shutdown, but with courts opening back up, we're going to start seeing eviction notices and late fees charged. The Commonwealth and the Virginia Supreme Court did put a reprieve on evictions and on late fees. I want to say it's through July 15th, but it might be June. I don't remember the exact date. But if you're a renter and you haven't mortgaged, haven't paid your rent, that rent is due. And while your landlord couldn't evict you the last several months, you're going to start seeing evictions take place if you haven't caught your rent up, or you haven't made arrangements with your landlord to pay those past rents.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, this was a lot of really good information. At first, it sounds a little scary, but the impression that I'm getting after listening to all of this is that it's the process of buying a house and being qualified for a house has not really changed. It's just a little bit. Well, it hasn't significantly changed. You still have to prove your income. You still have to prove when you go to closing that your income is, what it was. You might have a few more requirements before even going into a house, due to COVID and the concerns about being exposed. That pre-approval letter, wearing masks, having to stand apart, no open houses as we used to know them. Is that a good assessment of where things stand?
Yes.
Yeah.
I completely agree. If there's anything I would say is that while we've had to make some slight adjustments, the adjustments that needed to be made were minor and really insignificant in the big picture.
Okay.
And it is still strong in Virginia, especially, and in the DC market. And you can still get a house sold quickly and for top dollar. And for those buyers that are out there, there's still strong demand, and there's still the ability to get a mortgage, and can still show you houses. We see them in a variety of ways now, rather than just going and previewing them in person. So just some slightly different norms, but if you're looking to buy or sell a house, you can still do it, and there's no reason to wait.
Exactly. And that's, at the end of the day, that's all mine and Darren's job is. It's to take a complicated process that people do 3-4 times maybe in their entire life, that we deal with every single day, and just break it down into the simple steps, guide someone into what they need to do, and make sure that something that seems daunting at first can become a stress-free, easy process for them.
Mm-hmm. If you're thinking about buying a house and you're thinking maybe I should wait a couple of months or wait until next spring, find yourself in a situation where you've waited yourself so long that you've priced yourself out of a neighborhood you're interested in.
What do you mean? What do you mean price yourself out?
Well, because especially in Northern Virginia, price increases happen at a fairly rapid pace. And we don't know what interest rates are going to be next spring. But with right now, interest rates were somewhere around roughly, Trevor, around 3.5% or less.
Yeah. Good credit. You're seeing around the, low threes, even in some
So
situations high too. So
if you qualify for a home at a 3.5% interest rates jump to 3.70, 3.25, or 3.375. So interest rate goes up. Right. And the property values have increased. You may find yourself no longer able to afford the house that you could have afforded if you were looking right now. So that's my. If you've been thinking about it, this is the time to be looking. Talk to a great real estate agent, talk to a great lender. Trevor and I are both available, and get started now. And if for some reason, like you took a forbearance or your job got furloughed, we can help you put a plan in place so that when all those things are in place, you can be on the market.
So you can still work with people, and Trevor, you said there is some discretion with some things. So the basic things have remained. You have to prove your income. You have to prove that you have a stable job. It's just that maybe what a stable job is today was not what a stable job was a year ago. You can still see a property if you don't want to physically go there. You can see it virtually. But working and then also even if you were significantly impacted, like by losing your job or having a decrease in income, there are still some things, based on a person's individual situation that can be worked out. It's not always impossible just because you lost your job or had a different income, right?
correct.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that makes me feel good, and I think that's. I'm really glad that you guys took your time to do this, because there's a lot of uncertainty out there just about this. People have misconceptions. Like, I didn't know that you could see a property virtually until somebody told me. I never would have even thought to ask that. So, I mean, this has been incredibly helpful. And while it's timely now, the day that we're actually recording this, if you guys think that these things are going to continue to be in place, people need to know this. So, I think we'll keep, re-showing this video. Because, I think this is very important, not just because I'm going through, and people are buying and selling houses all the time and always moving in and out of the DC area. So whether you're a buyer or a seller or looking to refinance, I think this was very helpful. So is there anything else that you guys want to add that we didn't touch on or to emphasize?
Trevor?
I think we've covered things pretty in depth. Anything else? I think it's going to be a fairly individual differentiation. So at that point, it's better to just call me or Darren directly. Yeah, and we can talk about the individual plans and how to work around each unique situation.
Oh, and actually, I did have a question about financing, because a lot of people might not know this. I'm new to the home buying process, so but a lot of people might want to know, when should they start? When should they talk to a lender? Like if I were to call today and say I have everything that I need, like my income, my credit score, whatever. How long is that process going to take? When should people contact a lender? How far in advance of them trying to move? I guess I should say.
If you're looking to buy a house in 3 years, maybe now is not the right time to have an in-depth conversation. Mm-hmm. But even if you're a few months away, now is when you should start talking to a lender, because you want to make sure that if you have and you know that you are going to want to buy a house in a few months, mm-hmm. you're going to want to know where everything stands. The last thing you want is to get your heart set on moving somewhere, start looking at properties, say this is beautiful, this is the exact place I want to live, mm-hmm. spend a month dreaming about it, and then find out it's just not going to work out. Because what we can do is, if there's a specific target you have your heart set on, we can put together a plan. Okay. And so the worst case scenario that's going to happen, talking now, is you look good. 3 months, you can feel free to go out and buy a house. Mm-hmm. If we find something, then that's good that we've, best case scenario, if we found something now, mm-hmm. and you wanted to wait a few months, we can tackle it now, and you're not going to have that issue when you're actually ready to buy versus if you had waited until then. So anytime you're interested in, anytime someone's interested in looking, that's really the time to at least have a beginning consultation, look at your credit, look at where we stand, talk to Darren, find out, kind of at least narrow down a little bit about what kind of property you want. So you're not trying to go out and, in 3 months time, trying to go out and look at a 1-bedroom condo and also want to go see this 5-bedroom single family home. You want to try and narrow down, for your own time as well as Darren's, what you actually want and what you want to see, so that you're only going to properties that are going to be ones that you want. So it's always good to start in advance.
And for practical purposes, without a lender letter in hand, without a pre-qualification, sellers aren't going to let you see a house. So if you're thinking about buying a house, apply for a mortgage. Most lenders, and Trevor is no different, have an online process. It's very easy to do. Doesn't require a whole lot of, I got to give you a lot of stuff up front. It's going to be some information. And you can get that pre-qualification fairly quickly. 7 days oftentimes is all it takes. And in Trevor's case, probably just a day or two. Because that way you'll have it in hand. You'll be able to take a look at something in the event that you see something that you're interested in seeing. So, yeah. And Trevor can validate this too, because Gene, a lot of people, especially first-time buyers, really get concerned about applying for a mortgage because they're concerned that if they apply for more than one mortgage or multiple times, that it will grossly affect their credit report. And while it's impossible to say that it won't affect it at all, almost non-existent.
It's negligible, and at the end of the day, you don't really need to apply to a lot of mortgage lenders if you've talked to me already. So
if you talk to Trevor, you only need to talk to Trevor because there won't be anybody. But yeah, don't be afraid to apply. It doesn't cost you anything, and it doesn't affect your credit. But what it does is it gives you an honest answer as to what you're able to afford. It gives you the ability to go see properties right now. And if there's any issues that interfere with your ability to qualify, it allows you to put a plan in place. And one of the things that I love working about with Trevor, and one of the reasons why I partner with him frequently and refer him to my client, is that when an issue has come up, he's been able to sit down and go, okay, if you guys do this and this and this, it takes you approximately this long to get this fixed, and then you'll be able to move forward. And so it just gives you a plan, and having a plan and a strategy is the way to buy a house.
It's the biggest investment of most people's lives. You want to go into it with as much knowledge as possible.
Well, I think they got a lot of knowledge from this webinar, but
so very much.
I want to mention this before we go. If you both, Trevor and Darren, could put your contact information in the comments, you can put them in there after we finish, but so people know how to get in touch with you.
Awesome.
But is there anything else? Because I asked you if there's anything else you want to say, and then I threw in another question. Is there anything else that you guys want to just address before we leave that we didn't talk about?
Well, a while back when I was having some challenges in real estate, and it was during the winter months. We had tons of snow, and we had like a blizzard for a week. And I was like, nobody's buying a house. And a friend of mine said, are you sure? And I ran a search, and I discovered that people were buying houses during this full blizzard. And so that's what I want you to remember. It doesn't really matter what's going on. People have to buy and sell a house because people need a place to live. And a real estate agent like myself, a great mortgage lender like Trevor, we're ready, and we know how to handle all these kind of circumstances to get you what you want in the time you want it.
Trevor, is there anything you want to leave anybody with?
No, I think Darren pretty much summed it up very well.
Okay.
You're like
You're like what?
The postman. You know, they'll deliver in any weather. I'll say no matter how many viruses are out there.
Well, good to know. Neither rain nor sleet nor snow. I don't remember what the other thing.
No coronavirus will stop.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for your time and for all of the information. I really appreciate it. And Melinda Sigel left a very nice comment. She said this is one of the best discussions about residential real estate from A to Z during these challenging times. Great panelists, Darren Marquardt and Trevor Whalen.
I'll pay Melinda later. I love Melinda.
You've got to read the last sentence there too.
Oh, awesome moderation by Jean. And then it says Jean Humbrecht, her comment was cut off.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys. This seriously was very, very beneficial. And I think a lot of people got a lot out of this. So I'm just going to ask you guys, because this is live on Facebook right now, if you're watching this right now at 1:25 Eastern time. But people are going to see this video come up in their newsfeed later, and I'm going to replay it, obviously. So if anybody's watching this at a later time, like I said earlier, if you have a question, put something in the comments, and if it's something that we can answer, we will. Real estate's not my thing. Go to ask Trevor and Darren the questions, and they'll get in touch with you. Yeah, don't ask me that. Don't just put it in the comments. But Trevor and Darren will put their contact information in the comments as well. So I hope everybody enjoyed this. And again, Trevor and Darren, thank you very much. And you guys have a good weekend.
Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you, Jane.